good?
So I can ask.
I would like to call this meeting to order. Today, this is the regular meeting for the San Francisco Elections Commission. Today is Wednesday, November 20th, 2019. It is 6:01 p.m. I'm gonna call item number 1, call to order and roll call. So I guess I will call today. Commissioner Hill. Here. Commissioner Bernholtz. Here. Commissioner Donaldson. Not present. Commissioner Jordanic.
Here.
Commissioner Jung.
Here.
Commissioner Rowe.
Here.
And so we have quorum, and I just want to make a note that Commissioner Donaldson did let me know that he was running late today. So I'll move on to item number 2, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the Elections Commission's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda. So I would like, if anyone in the public would like to make some public comment?
Before we go, would you like me to take minutes?
Oh, right, yes, if you can, thank you. So we'll have 3 minutes for each comment. Deputy City Attorney, can you turn on the, thank you. Okay.
Hello, Commissioners. Brent Turner with California Association of Voting Officials. We just wanted to put on the record a letter that went out recently, and I can just read it into the record quickly within my time period. It says, Dear Governor Newsom, we the undersigned have deep concerns regarding our election system security. Scientific studies and technologists have concluded the private secret software operating the current systems to be unacceptably unprotected as to interference agents, in parentheses, foreign and domestic. The solution of public systems referenced in AB 1784 must now be encouraged. The matching funds will be utilized toward best election system security practices. California has the opportunity to provide much needed leadership and will hopefully do so. Thanks in advance for your attention to this matter. Ambassador R. James Woolsey, former Director, Central Intelligence Agency, Brian Fox, Technologist, Creator Bashell, Brent Turner, Election Reform Analyst, and Trent Lang with California Clean Money Campaign. The reason why I wanted to read this into the record was just to reiterate and reframe to make sure that we're all well aware of the importance that this commission is playing currently in the making of history in the United States. We're all seeing the events of the day unfurl on the news channels and C-SPAN and the hearings that are happening. We want to make sure we break out of the cycle of perhaps unelected presidents, and by securing the systems here in San Francisco, getting a certified open source paper ballot system in California, we can lead the country toward these types of systems, and that would be very beneficial to our democracy. So I don't want to understate the issue. I know over the years we've had redundant conversations, but hopefully we can all get together on this one and urge Mayor Breed to urge Governor Newsom to support the matching funds under AB 1784. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question. Could you speak a little bit more to what is included in AB 1784?
The call for matching funds was really, in my opinion, the main piece of the request. My understanding is if the governor puts $16 million aside, Los Angeles will take $8 million and San Francisco will take $8 million, and then that can expedite our efforts here toward building out the system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
What he said.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, open source voting. Discussion and possible action regarding the City and County of San Francisco's open source voting system. We'll have Commissioner's report, Technical Advisory Committee report, and then the Director's report. So let's start with Commissioner's report.
Okay, I think everything I had to report on this would be covered by the tech portion.
All right, then let's move on with Technical Advisory Committee report. Commissioner Jadonic, do you have someone that will be?
Yeah, we do have a member Cattell. Thank you for coming, Member Cattell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hold on.
Can I give them, well, that's gonna be, okay.
I can
This
just
will
turn
be-
that one on if you want.
That would be great, yeah. I mean, there's nothing to see yet because it's still pulling it up, but,
Can you spell your last name for me?
absolutely, Kattoew.
I think the other mic is also on.
Is that, this is not right?
I turned both of them on, so.
Oh, this, okay, great. Then,
Whichever
I have to
one.
damage the cables here. So, this will be, updated in two parts. I'll give an update on, what we discussed in the TAC, second, but I'll, give you all a quick overview of what we, the proof of concept software we're working on first at Commissioner Janonic's request. Let's see that is here, so, and I will also compare that with the of course I'm getting it wrong. Here we go, alright, and I will pull up the existing results page as well that the department currently publishes. So we have been, among other things, working on the results page. As you can probably tell, none of the people on our committee is an exceptionally talented graphic designer, which is why.
We can't see it.
Oh, you can't see me. But
Is
you're
it
still
plugged in?
in.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were gonna need tech support on that.
Okay, sorry, yeah, you said you would pull it up and I was messing with it, so I didn't.
In the past,
notice
it just showed up automatically.
Do you wanna look at it or should I? I mean, I don't think I'm the right person to look at it, but yeah.
Alright, I tried unplugging it and replugging
I
it, so we'll see
can
if it
try
works.
to. Yeah, sorry, my secretarial commission skills are, this is pressing the limit here.
Alright, while we figure that out, I'll do the second part first.
Could we just call them?
So we, at the most recent TAC meeting, we discussed an article that, came out recently that, talked about the election in November in, I think it was Alabama, where, say again? Mississippi, sorry, mixed over. There was a municipal election or a statewide election in Mississippi in November where one county used an open source system developed by Voting Works that includes a ballot marking device and a scanner. And that was it was a pilot they did there, and we talked about that. One of the reasons we're able to do it is because Mississippi doesn't have a state level certification program and doesn't require certification for its election systems at all, which is an approach. But it allowed Voting Works to come in and take one county and basically run a pilot there. And it's a pretty interesting system they've got there using mostly just commercial off-the-shelf hardware and some open source software that they've put online. And that's been pretty successful. We are trying to find out more details about it, in particular how they, what parts of tabulation they did, if any, because the media coverage doesn't mention that. But the organization itself is partly based here in San Francisco, so we should be able to contact some of these people and find it out. So we discussed that. And secondly, we had a bit of a beginning of a discussion among the TAC members for how we and also the commission might be able to sort of speed this project up and get it out of its rut.
He did it.
Excellent. Okay, I'll go there in a minute. I'll just finish that thought and say, with the most recent city budget not allocating more money to the project, and with the project manager having less and seemingly not being replaced, there's not a lot of progress that we see. So we've started to talk a bit about how we think that can change. And I'm sure that Commissioner Janai can speak to that things up there as well. But going back to the results page, let's see. So as I was beginning to say earlier, when it was brought to my attention, you can actually see anything. As you can now see, None of us is especially talented graphic designers, so this looks pretty basic. But some of the things that we have tried to do is make this at least a little bit more featureful than the current results page. In particular, for ranked choice elections, we wanted to, and this is better demonstrated, I think, by the district attorney election. For ranked choice elections, we wanted to indicate the winner and the final round vote percentages right on the primary results page. And you can click through to get to the individual rounds in the elimination table there. But this also lets you see what happened and who won on the main page, which is one of the things that you currently can't on the page that the city currently uses. Where is this attorney? Here it is. So this doesn't. I mean, it's not sorted by who got the most votes either. But this doesn't show you. This shows you who got the most first choice votes, but it doesn't tell you anything about what happened after that. And it's not obvious that the person with the most first choice votes actually won. Which in this case they did, but it looked like it won't. It looks at one point like they might not. And when you click complete RCV results, it takes you to this page, and then you have to click this thing, and to find the race you were looking at again, and then click this link, and now you know who won. So we wanted to bring that forward a bit. We also wanted to make clear for measures, for example, whether they passed or failed and what the failure threshold was. So in this election, we didn't end up having any counterintuitive results where a measure got more than 50% but failed anyway because it needed 2/3. That was narrowly avoided for Proposition D here, but that could have happened. And then we would have indicated that it failed even though it got more than 50%, which is also not obvious from the current results page. And another thing that we wanted to improve, and this will be, I'll need to demonstrate this with a different election because we didn't have any of those in this November, but where's the school board at? Oh, here we go, school. Some races have multiple winners because they're vote for 3 races. And so we wanted to make it clear as well. If you just list the candidates and the percentage of votes they got, it's not that obvious, especially in a race with multiple winners, who actually won and who lost. And we think that this makes that clear as well. In this case, that it's hopefully pretty clear that the bolded candidates with the check marks are the ones that won, because this was a 3-winner race. But the school board race in November 2020, for example, will be a 4-winner race. So it's not always consistent. We want to make that clear. So there's more we want to do. Obviously, the detailed results page is, this would at least put that on the web. Right now you have to download a spreadsheet to get this kind of information per precinct, but this is still not great because you would still have to go find your precinct, and you would still have to go add up the election day and vote by mail rows to even know what happened. So I want to make some further improvements to this. But we are hoping to get, and I think we're most of the way there, to be to achieve parity with what the department's current website can do, and also to add some things that are useful for members of the public to more easily understand election results that the current website is not supporting. So with that, I'll take any questions and also give Commissioner John a chance to say anything he wants to say.
I don't have anything more to add. So.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. So you did this after the election was done, pulling data from a final data set, or were you doing this in some kind of real time along with the city's tabulator also?
We wrote code that allows us to pull in the data from the city. So we took actually some of the data that's over here on the detailed reports page and pulled that in. Okay. We haven't been updating the website in real time, but that's mostly because we didn't bother. We could have done that every day at 4 or 5 p.m. if we really wanted to.
Right, okay. And then I just have I realize that there's a UX issue here, but I'm curious if the city reports the results, are these in the same order in which the candidates are listed on the ballot, or what is the logic behind the order of the candidates that appear on the results page? I mean, that's probably a question for her, John.
I don't know what you're looking at, but on the
So just from your office, just the printout of.
So I think that's from ballot type 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how the system's pulling the information into the reports, but then the summary reports that we issue in the HTML would put the candidate with the most votes first. So you've got the HTML, which the department has put together, and then the report that you're looking at is from the system, it's from the voting system.
Okay, so this coming straight, so the fact that, if you could go back to the page you were just at, where you showed London.
Yeah, I think it's most obvious here in the mayor's results. So this
Right.
is just to show context, this is the summary page on the Department of Elections website. This is where you end up if you say, give me the results for the
Right.
most recent election. And then,
So
I
this-
think it might just be RCV races where this happens, honestly, that the candidates are listed in an arbitrary order rather than sorted by us.
So there is no logic to this order as it's appearing?
Ballot
It's
type
not the way
1.
they're on the
No,
ballot.
there is a logic, so
Oh.
ballot type 1.
Oh, it is from a ballot, this is the way
Correct.
they appear on the ballot, okay.
Correct.
Thank you, it was just curiosity, thank you.
I'd like to thank you for doing this, and this is very helpful, and particularly with respect to the reporting of RCV results in the district attorney election. This is much improved.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it would have been, I mean, without disclosing my support in this race, it would have certainly been better for this demonstration if the other candidate had won, because then we would have had someone who lost the first choice votes but won the eventual election. And unfortunately, to find a case like that, we have to go back quite a few years, and we didn't. I argue for at one point we didn't go ahead and import the November 2010 election results where Leah Cohen won after being third in first choice votes. That would have been a pretty entertaining one to graph out there.
And just one follow-up question, even if the department isn't able to update to a form similar to the one you present here soon, or at all, anything keeping you from simply publishing this type of summary of results in future elections?
No, I mean, we've theoretically already published it, we just haven't told anyone what the URL is, so you can argue about whether it constitutes publishing or not. But yeah, we currently got just like the June 2018, November 2018, and November 2019 elections in there. There is some manual work involved in importing these things because different counties' data formats differ. The data the city is exposed has also changed over time, so importing old elections, even from the 2014-ish era, require work, and some things require hand coding. What the approval threshold for a measure was is often not made available in a machine readable format, so a human has to actually go and put that in by hand. And I'll give an acknowledgement to Carl Haig here, who actually went and did that for. Actually, no, I'm wrong. We haven't imported November 2016 yet, and when we do, we'll have to deal with the fact that there were 24 local measures and 17 state measures that all have approval thresholds that would need to be input by a human, so that I don't envy whoever's going to do that. But aside from that, it's not a tremendous amount of work to import historical more official results. It's just a little bit
Are the 2010 results no longer available?
on the department website they are. We just haven't put it in our system. We've just only gone as far back as June 2018, just because it's work and it didn't contribute any. I mean, aside from the June 2016 primary that has a partisan primary where different people go to different ballots, which I don't think is something we can even deal with yet, so we need to. That would contribute an interesting variation on the data that we already have, but anything beyond that wouldn't, and so we haven't put in the effort to pull in 2014, 2012, 2010, because it's, at least for testing purposes, it's not interesting for at least the most relevant definition of interesting.
I also want to point out that in 2010, with David Carey and Jim Soper, we put together David Carey had a program to run the data on a daily basis and check it against the department, just as a demonstration project. We have that on WordPress I can share with you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I have actually done this for the June 2018 mayor's race myself. I have only just taken a small crack at using the new data format that's been published 2019 going forward, because none of my co-works anymore, because there's a new system, so everything changed. And I have gotten about halfway to plugging the gap, but I haven't had enough weekend time to really do that and confirm the department's results on that.
One other question, maybe you covered this and started to my to the commission and the public that I'm late, but the undervotes, these undervote counts, what's the nature of those?
You mean these here?
So this is the department's version.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you're looking at the, sorry, let me take you back to our version because you missed that. You came in,
Sorry.
I think most of the way during my demo, that's okay. I will just pull it up again. So here's, the numbers for this will, I think, differ slightly because this is probably slightly older data we recently imported. And what I was showing, I think, right before you came in is that this is also a reporting format that David Carey recommended to us. The results that are currently reported by the city's website only show first choice totals, and so you don't actually really know who won in a closely contested RCV race. And so we came up with this format where it shows you in which round the candidate was eliminated and what percentage of the vote they had in that round. We also considered other formats, like you could have a column for first choice totals and a column for final round votes or something along that line, along those lines.
Very nice.
So the number of undervotes here is slightly different. I believe that is a number of ballots where there was not, I think in this case, all of the choices would have to be blank.
Is that, Director Arns, the undervotes were no selections?
If it's by contest, no, it'd be,
There you go.
if it's by contest, no, it'd be for that contest.
Yeah, so for an RCV contest, I believe that would be that no ranks were filled out.
No selections in that.
Right,
RCV.
because otherwise, if someone left like their first, second, and third choice blank and then made a fourth choice, I believe that would be reported as a, well, it would be reported as like a first round vote for that candidate they made their fourth choice. It's also led to some interesting discrepancies between, what is a first choice vote total, what is a first round vote total. Those definitions are actually slightly different because of what I mentioned, because you have people leaving the first choice blank and then filling out their second or third or fourth choice. Because people do weird things with their mail ballots and the machines can't reject them.
Right.
Member Cattell, could you maybe show, for the people in the public that are here, just how would they find this, the URL to the demo from, say, GitHub or something?
Yeah, let me see, do we have that?
And then what I could do is I could email the URL out to the commission after the meeting, and if anyone has any suggestions on features, could feel free to let me know, and I can bring those suggestions to tech.
Also, maybe we can add the URL to the agenda packet since it was shared here.
Yes.
Go back.
Sure, I could do
Commissioner
that.
Gianni, do we have this link from our main page? And-
Yeah, scroll down to the external links. The top, the first
Oh,
one.
here we go, OSU Tech and GitHub. Okay, so it takes you here, but then you still have to go to, is there a link to the demo directly?
And then you can go to the
Oh,
top
here,
of the page,
yeah.
or scroll towards the top.
Yeah, I've got it, it's here.
Okay.
Demos are published here, there's a link. So there's a bit of circuitous path, but I think the URL might be easiest. It's osvtech.github.io/osv-results-demo. And commissioners and I can communicate that.
Any other questions?
Just one, I know that the department is upgrading the software on the voting systems from 5.2 to 5.10, I believe you said. Is that going to affect this? Will you need to
I'm not aware of whether there's any changes in the data format. I would not expect there to be, especially because the major version number is not changing. So I would be professionally slightly upset with the people at the Dominion if they decided to make a breaking change in their data format and they didn't call version 6.
Yeah.
So I'm not expecting that, but we will. I guess we will find out when the March election happens or whenever the upgrade happens and see the data that comes out then.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on this. It's really very impressive.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I think this is incredibly helpful for those of us who have struggled in the past to identify who won various races and had to work through the links on the website. So thank you for putting this together.
Likewise, thank you so much for doing this. I wanted to, first note that Commissioner Donaldson did get in at 6:14 p.m. And then my follow-up is, maybe this is a question to Director Arns. So is the RCV, this note that you wrote, like Mayor, RCV first choice total, that's new for this year? that, like even dash to say these are the first choice totals, is that new or was that in last election?
No, so all the reports,
Just the, like, the title, do you know what I mean, that just says mayor dash RCV first choice total, like, I don't know if I saw that before, if that's something new on our current website.
on the detailed reports?
No, just like on the summary page, and then you like scroll down, it says mayor, RCV first choice totals. And that actual language that says RCV first choice totals, was that always on? I don't think so.
recall.
Yeah,
Might have been, I don't recall.
okay.
I think you had started that last spring.
Oh, last spring, okay. So, one, I really appreciate that, and then I think, just as like a quick feedback that I think, I mentioned this before, is I always found it a little confusing when, this election, it didn't apply for it, but in March, you will for, I think if there are going to be any state races, but especially for presidential, the total that you see on the SF elections website, I understand it's the total for just SF votes, not like the total of like, let's say that, you know, from the primary, Joe Biden gets the top, but in San Francisco, it was, you know, Kamala Harris, but it would, so on the site, on the SF elections website, it would have Kamala Harris looks like she would win. And so there's this like confusion, if you're going to just the SF elections website, that maybe she won the California primary. Does that make sense? And so like, similar to this that says like mayor RCV first choice total, like even if it just says like SF elections, like results just for SF, and then if there's like a link to the, you know, Secretary of State website, then I think that would just make it a little bit easier for folks to, like notice that it's not, these were not the California primary results, these are just SF elections results. Because as someone that looked at this website, I've always got confused myself, and so this was just something that I noticed, and the clearer we can be on these websites, I feel like it would just make things a little bit easier visually for folks. So just that was the one thing that I was just thinking from looking forward, and if I see anything else on the website, I'll also provide that feedback as well. But thank you for doing this. This is really, I like the colors, like it's very clear. I think that's just like, it just makes it much easier for folks to see it. The check mark and the colors, I genuinely love that. It's very clear, so thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just add that the issue that you mentioned, I think the most recent example of that was actually in the last election when Proposition 10 won in San Francisco and was defeated statewide.
Right, yeah.
And so that's also been on our radars, I think, for us to look into, but I think it's, if I remember correctly, like the Secretary of State is actually not as good at providing useful data as the city is, and so we haven't, and there's other issues that make it more complicated for us to just, ideally we'd like to just like even just present the statewide results in line, or at least know whether the measure lost or won, or whether which candidate won on the state level. And that's something that's gonna take a bit more work, but certainly I think linking to the Secretary of State's website for that context would be a good place to start.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Could we have the director's report?
Ron?
Good evening. My name is Laurent Sangurani. I apologize on behalf of Linda. She's ill today. So if you have any question regarding some of the initiatives that we are working on, including security and we mentioned the Garner Group, and actually now called the Garner period, let me know and I will make sure that those questions get answered to the next session. Having said that, I thought I'd take the time to kind of discuss what I think I last discussed on the last meeting, which is we're going to try to do a ranked choice voting risk limiting audit. I sent a presentation, I don't know where it is.
Oh.
I
Yeah,
don't check that
I thought you
email.
sent there, I'm sorry, yeah, I didn't.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you like the key for the presentation? Or?
If you have it,
Yeah.
but we need a laptop.
Can I do it here?
Yeah, that's, I don't know whose computer this is.
I think it just lives there.
Okay, great. Apparently I need tech support skills in addition to my other.
Oh, I do too, by the way.
You're
Even
doing great,
more so
you're
if it
doing
doesn't
great.
say Mac.
Find on the website.
Okay. All right. We have a lot of technicians here, right?
Yeah, hey, Chris. Better technology.
We just automatically assume it's Chris.
The flash drive is not popping up. Maybe you can.
Actually, I'm not actually that good at these here.
Usually just like populate.
You use the other fellows?
We use this one.
Yeah, you use his own.
No, I use that.
Well,
This
there's
is pretty
Candy
funny.
Crush on this
Sorry about that.
computer.
All right, I didn't realize you-
Yeah, they
Oh,
hey, there's Candy Crush.
Yeah, I sent it to Doris, and then I sent it to you, and I just didn't know the protocol,
Oh,
so.
yeah, sorry.
There's Candy Crush. It's great.
While we are figuring out the technology, would you mind spelling your last name for me?
Sure, just like it's spelled. So it's, just like it sounds, I should say. So it's S as Susan, A as Apple, N as Nancy, D as Dog, R as Roger, O as Olive, L as Larry, I, N as Nancy, and I.
Showing up.
You've done that before.
The D is recovery, right? So this is what.
All right, well,
I'll make a copy.
Here we go.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, there it is.
well, it's a fidgety little computer.
I'll hold it in.
Oh my God. All right.
We'll take this one. That's fine.
Copy it, but people are trying to copy it. Take that.
Okay.
Exciting.
Sorry about that.
You're gonna have to flip it.
Yeah.
Alright.
So yeah, I think, 4 or 6 weeks ago, I said we're gonna try to do this project, which is a ranked choice voting on the, sorry, risk limiting audit on the ranked choice voting. And, I'm here to provide an update. So we have a project name. I didn't come up with a name, it's called Shangri-La. So, a couple of things I just want to mention. To my knowledge, I believe this is the first open source sponsored project by City of San Francisco and Department of Technology. The second thing I'd like to mention, and that's actually interesting in that it's the first independent verification, also to my knowledge, of the tabulation of the Dominion machine. And actually it's not something that we were planning on doing, it just happened to be as part of the project, we had to verify that. And so as a result of that, someone wrote a tabulator literally in 2 days. The other one is clearly the first ever risk limited audit on ranked choice voting. And so, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the risk limiting audit. I'm a little bit familiar with the risk limiting audit, so I'm going to try to get to you in like layman's term what it is, right? Ultimately, a risk limiting audit is going to allow you to verify that the contest did not select the wrong candidate as the winner. And they do that with a certain statistic, it's statistic based, so they do that with what's called the risk limit percentage, right? So if you have a 5% risk limit, that means you have 95% that the risk limit audit was able to basically confirm the results. Yes? Okay. So there's different ways of doing risk limiting audit. The main two methods, one is called the ballot polling. The other one, which is the one we actually use for this pilot, is called ballot comparison. In a nutshell, what it means is we take a sample random list of ballots. We actually compare the paper ballot. So we have people actually looking at the ballot, looking at what they see on the ballot, typing it into the machine, and then the computer goes back and then try to identify the delta between what was entered and what's in the cast vote record from Dominion, right? And so that's a very simplified view of what that is. And so if you'd like to drill down, I'll be happy to drill down. But the one thing I want to point out is a ballot comparison audit is much more efficient than a ballot polling audit. And the reason for that is the number of ballots you need to pool to do the audit is significantly less. So if you can look at this, I just put a couple of arrows because this gets complicated really quick. But ultimately, this says that for a 10% risk limit, if you use the ballot polling and you have a 4% margin of victory, I believe you have to pool with ballot, with ballot comparison, you have to pull like 156 ballots. With the ballot polling, it's 2,500. And because we've actually already done some testing, we know how long it takes to actually go physically pull the ballots from the warehouse and so on and so forth, the carton and trays. So this is a huge difference. It's basically you can either do it in a day or maybe in this case probably like, I don't know, 2 or 3 days just to pull the ballots. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Doesn't the system still require us to trust that the election machine in question is producing a cast vote record that matches what it is actually tallying in the background?
Well, that's the whole idea. If it doesn't match, then the audit fails.
But we are relying on the election system to tell us what its cast vote record is. It's my understanding that this is the reason why you would switch.
Right, so the cast vote
source
record
system.
is something that Dominion, spits out, excuse my French, but ultimately what it shows is, I don't know if you've ever seen one, have you? A cast vote
Once,
record?
but yeah,
Okay,
please explain
so,
again, yeah.
so what it does, it has the contest ID, the candidates, and then there's different things in there, right? One of them is, mark is ambiguous, right? And so if you get to a certain threshold, if the mark is ambiguous, right, that ballot goes to verification, right? And so all of that, so that's a raw file from the system, right? It's not how it computed, it's how it looked at how the machine looked at the ballot and came up with, this is what the mark looked like.
Okay.
Yes?
Just one follow-up question to make sure I understand.
Yes.
Is there any way, as far as you know, that an election, that say Dominion,
Yeah.
could change its cast vote record? That there could be something happening in the background that would lead a cast vote record to differ from what is actually being processed?
Well, I don't know that, but I can say that that's actually kind of the very reason you want a risk limiting audit, because they will catch that. Absolutely. Because
Is my question
ultimately-
making sense? I'm just wondering whether there is any way that the risk limiting audit won't catch it. And sorry if this is a
No, that's
dense
fine.
question.
The foundational premise.
The foundational premise of open source voting is that there might be something happening in the background, in the technology, in the software that we can't see, that leads the output that we see when we request it to differ from what's actually being processed by the
Right.
machine.
Or that is relied upon for the.
Right.
Right,
And
exactly.
so I'm trying to backtrack a little bit. When you do the audit, right, someone from the Department of Election actually goes and get the actual physical ballot, right, that has the marks,
Mhm.
right? Then the auditor looks at that, right, and it's gonna look at the ballot and say, this is what I see, right? They type that into the system, right? Now that is compared with the cast vote record from Dominion.
So
right?
this is the whole purpose of the
Yeah,
RLA.
and
is
so,
to address
so
this.
if the cast vote record by some action was accurate, whatever it is, right, then the audit would fail completely, right? They would say, oh my God, we have 400 ballots, none of them match, or 50 were wrong, or something like that, and it would completely fail.
Right, and just to follow up, my concern
Yeah.
is the hypothetical scenario in which the cast vote record, in which the RLA succeeds because the cast vote record has a certain set of data, but actually what was tabulated by the machine differs from the cast vote record. Does that make sense? And I'm just wanting to make sure if that's even a possibility, or what I hear you saying is that the cast vote record is processed from data that is like pre-computation, like nothing has been done with that data first.
Hasn't been tabulated yet, that's
Hasn't been
correct.
tabulated.
Right, it's the raw file that comes from, the machine, it hasn't been tabulated yet, so.
So I guess my question is there a way to verify that it's the raw
We're gonna
data?
get to that.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
So.
Could I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
For the RLA that you're
Is that
gonna
on
be.
the map, or? 'Cause
No,
I can-
just
I can answer those.
very high level, very high level. What percent are you gonna be using?
5%.
5%? And then since the two of the races, the ones that were very close were the D5 and the D8 race, do you know what the numbers of ballots
So-
estimated, do you know the estimated number of ballots for those two races to get 5%?
Well, we're gonna be running an audit tomorrow, right? And so y'all, I believe, invited to come and actually see it in action, at Pier 31. Sorry?
We haven't been invited.
Hmm?
We've not been invited.
Oh, okay, all right. So anyway, maybe you can see it there.
Well,
But so to answer your question, we've done dry runs, we've done the DA. We had to pull 200 ballots to get to a conclusion.
and then how about the D5, do you know for that?
We have
Okay.
a single contest.
Okay.
Yes. Anyone has a question on the map? Please. Okay.
I have an easier question. What time at Pier 31 tomorrow?
Yeah, so it's at 9 o'clock, and this whole audit, as I've been saying for the last several months, was for the department just to see what it was all about. This was never really meant to be a huge event. We just got the audit on Tuesday, actually, so it's not like we've had this in hand for many months. Or Monday, I think, and we ran on Tuesday. So this is all coming together as we speak, so this is not anything that being held back from the commission. It's something that the department wanted to see what Richmond audit was about, what it would take, and then to move forward with the Richmond audit. So that's what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I confirm that the paint is still not dry on the code, so we're literally just making the date. And remember, we started that 6 weeks ago. So, yeah, it's brand new. That's why it says first. So, for those interested, this is the repository where the code resides. Again, it's an open source implementation of a RLA on the ranked choice voting. The reason it's never been done before, my understanding, limited, it's very complicated math. It's implementation of academic research that was actually recently done in Australia. Australia has a lot of ranked choice voting contests, and there's a lot of academic research around ranked choice voting. And so really it's a combination of research here as well as in Australia. There are 6 key contributors to this project, and we'll walk through each of them one by one. But the funny thing about this project is we all spoke different language, and this is really kind of shown not just in talking to each other, but also through the actual language used for the software. We have a little bit of everything. We have Python, C++, Node.js, you name it, I think we have it, which is why we use the Jupyter Notebook to integrate everything more easily. The one thing I want to clarify, and like John said, it's a pilot, and it's not a full RLA. What it is, it's a ballot comparison, as I just described, of the vote by mail only, right? There's a lot of reason why we're limiting ourselves to vote by mail. You cannot audit precinct ballot because there's a traceability issue. You potentially could trace the ballot to the people that casted it. And until that gets resolved, we cannot do ballot comparison audit on precinct, okay? So it's just vote by mail. I saw from the last presentations like 71% of the content of all the ballot casted. But we cannot call it a full RLA because of that. All right, so,
But could you explain that again? Why is it the precinct would reveal, is it because some precincts only have a couple votes, or what's the?
yeah, I mean, I think someone could walk into a precinct, cast a vote, and then it goes into the warehouse, and I guess people could identify that ballot too.
I'm still not clear, how could someone identify?
I mean, it does depend on the number of votes cast at the polling place, the timing. You can look at the cast vote record potentially, you can get a timestamp on when the ballot was passed, was counted. But also, the difference with the vote by mail and the precinct ballots is that the vote by mail ballots give what we call an imprint. So there's a tabulator that processed the ballot, the date that the ballot was processed, the time that the ballot was processed. That doesn't happen at the polling places to identify these ballots. So to bring a polling place ballot into a ballot level comparison is impossible unless there's an imprint. And once you do an imprint on a polling place ballot, then really with some certainty you could identify how people voted at a polling place, especially if you have less votes than a higher turnout polling place.
How would you do that? You have to pull the street roster every hour, see who voted within that last hour or something.
Exactly.
That would be a lot, anyway.
I mean,
You could, I get it. It would be a lot more.
Yeah.
Somebody really have to, yeah.
So anyway, so I would just want to make sure that people understood the scope of the pilot, and don't take the thing as we actually live the entire contest. So, first of all, I would like to thank the people that actually worked on this project. As I said, I was on it a little bit. They worked 24/7, I can attest to it. I also want to thank Linda for actually sponsoring the project. Although most of the people on this project worked pro bono, we did hire a contractor to help us out on a certain component of the audit tool. And so we're very much thankful for Linda to helping us with that. I also want to thank all the members of the Department of Election that give us a little bit of their time at probably the worst time for us to ask questions, which is October, right in the middle of elections. We're trying to really debug things and so on and so forth. And so we're very thankful very appreciative for their willingness to help. So the core team is really kind of, you can think about it as two different sub-teams. One is the ranked choice voting team, and again, most of these folks are from Australia. Michelle Blum is actually the person that built most of the technology that's underneath the map of the ranked choice voting. And you'll have a report on the next few slides. Dr. Andrew Conway was actually the husband of the next person, sorry, not the next person, the one after that, Vanessa T. He basically contributed some of his time as a CEO, by the way, to build the tabulator and converter. And Peter Stuckey is a person that also was participating in the research and is a key contributor to that. We talked on the phone, on Zoom, or whatever we call it nowadays. I have to say, it was a little strange. By way of background, my dad was a tailor, my mom was a seamstress, and of course, I grew up in France. And until I met these people, I thought a martingale was something they actually put in a suit or a coat. It's a tailoring term, but I also found out it's a lot of mathematics and statistics, also known for poker. So anyway, that's the type of thing we got into a little bit. So the RLA team was really two people. One is Dan King, was the person that we contracted with that helped us build a good chunk of the UI, as well as a lot of different things. I'll go into more detail. And then Philip B. Stark was really the inventor of RLA. We did a lot of the work in the background to integrate all of this together to Jupyter Notebook, and a lot of new technology was actually produced as a result. So as you can tell, there's a lot of bright people on this page, and I'm not on it because I didn't want to roll up the IQ of the team, and there's not a chance I'm going to do that. But there's a lot of bright people right there. It was a privilege really to be associated with them. I've seen them in action. So I'm gonna try to get you like a kind of a high-level overview, and maybe I'll explain some of the questions you might have had, and then we'll do a drill down if you care to. But ultimately, I'll start with a cast vote record, which is the file that's produced that you see on the Department of Election website, right? You can pull and look at it if you like, right? That information is basically an input to a couple of systems, right? The first one is the tabulator and the converter. RARE is a format that the Australian came up with. I don't even know what it actually stands for because we don't have time to talk about that. But basically, it takes the CBR, tabulates, converts into a format where the whole process then starts making assertions about the election contest.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second to ask, is it possible to have this presentation be included in our minutes so that
Agenda
I'm noticing folks taking photos.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, as I said, I sent them, I didn't know, I thought.
Right, but we can put it online afterwards, so you don't have to
Okay.
keep documenting.
Okay, great, sorry about that.
No, please go
No, it's
on.
not. We can add it to the agenda pack after the fact, correct?
Right, and then upload that.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So, as I said, so the first step is we take the CBR, and then it goes into the tabulator converter, outputs a new file, which is again a format that the Australian call RARE, and I don't know what it stands for, and I apologize for that. And ultimately, that becomes the input to the next grid box of step 2, which takes this file and start making assertions, and I'll walk you through what those assertions can be. But it's, for example, candidate 15 could not have been eliminated before candidate 18. Candidate 14 could not have, won candidate against candidate 17, and so on and so forth. It starts making those assertions. The assertion, so it spits out this assertion file, which is the assertion JSON, which is actually fed to a visualizer, so people like me can start understanding what this is. So I'll show you that in a second. And I'll show you basically it's a graphical tree of all the assertions that are being made by the engine. And so that's step 3. After that, step 4, just like any other audit, the Department of Election will generate a seed by rolling 10 number dice and produce a random sequence to which then the system starts generating a sample list of ballots randomly generated using that seed number. Yes, that's one of the input to this tool. The second input is the CBR again, and the same CBR as used prior. And then the ballot manifest, which is something the Department of Election produced. It doesn't come from system, it comes from the Department of Election. And it basically lists, this ballot is located in tray 1, card 2, and it's part of batch 5, and it's the 27th ballot of batch 5. Okay? Which, by the way, I'm not an expert on that, but I also believe on the precinct ballot, I believe they're not sorted that way. And so they're completely randomly packed for the traceability reason. And so it's almost impossible to first find them physically and then to actually build logic around them. Okay. So those three, you'll see the manifest and the CBR becomes entry into the RLA tool. The RLA tool then, it generates its own output, which is the ballot to pool, as I call it. So it's basically saying, these are the ballots that, first of all, this is the number of ballots we need to pool, and these are the actual ballots we want you to fetch out of the warehouse so that they can be audited, okay? And so, so then in step 5, or step 6, I'm sorry, once the ballots have been fetched from the warehouse, the audit can start. And so the audit starts by having people, basically, as I said, look at the ballots, type it into a system, right? And the result of that, of course, is an output, and the output is, we called it MVR, and that's just another, lack of time, no creativity whatsoever. It stands for manual vote record, which is basically how the auditor looked at the ballot, and the result of that is, instead of CVR, it's MVR, right?
How is the MVR created? Is it by, if this is a manual vote, do they type it into a machine, or
Yeah, we'll get to that. They actually type what they see, and then we generate the JSON file out of that. Okay? And then actually we generate a JSON file for each ballot. Okay? Let me see, where are we now? Yeah, so it goes into manual vote recorder tool, it spits out the manual vote record, and then it goes into the audit engine, which now is going to compare the result of the manual vote record to the CDR, and look at the 5%, in our case, the 5% risk limit. It will come out with a result that says it either failed, which means I need more ballots, right? Or it succeeded, and the audit is over. Okay? I'm not going to spend more time on this because this is like the overview, and this is like for people that really want to get to the detail. But there's all of the different repository. If you want to go look at the open source, did I mention it's all open source, right? Okay. The only thing, if you want to make a change, I'll make it before I send it a copy. On step 5, it says RLA VP Tech IO. This is also moved to a GitHub repository. I don't have it on top of my head, but it's something Dan came. So it's also in the open source format. But as you can, one thing I will draw to this is just, so you got Node.js, you got Jupyter, you got C++, you've got JavaScript, you've got Python. It's a pilot. So we have people use what they know best at the end of the day. So as I mentioned before, one of the, I don't call it a side effect, but one of the things that I actually discovered unbeknownst to me through the project was that we actually were tabulating in the back the result of the elections. And so when I saw that, I said, well, does it match? And to be clear, when we started, it didn't match. It took us to report 5 or 6, if I remember, to finally understand what was going on. And then from report 6 to 12, every report that the Department of Elections submitted, we're able to match the result vote for vote. And so, I mean, this is a really high-level overview, but basically that's what it is. It matched vote for vote what Dominion tabulated.
When you say matched vote for vote, you pull a
the
sample.
Results, right.
You pull a sample, and there's some way that you, in Dominion, you say tabulate the same sample?
No. So this is not based on the sample. This is actually taking the entire CDR file, right, and tabulating what the CDR file tells us, right? And then, so it's like, this is actually the entire context. This is not just vote by mail. Sorry, this is the entire contest, tabulation of the entire contest. I don't know if you have the Department of Election website, but this is actually, it matches vote for vote.
Okay.
Yes.
So can you just repeat that the first 3 were not matched? You said the first 5 rounds
first
did
5.
not, and then why didn't it match?
Because we're writing code.
Oh, you were, okay.
And that was our CD contest? Or
Sorry?
that was our CD contest, or that was valid?
Yeah, the only thing, so we hone in on, we really had to be, we didn't know which audit we wanted to take. This is a decision that John was going to make. But at the end of the day, I forgot how many RCV contests there were. Let's say there were 7. One was almost irrelevant from a statistical perspective because Mayor Breed won by 70% or something like this, right? The other 5, there's only 1 candidate, right? So we'll kind of, start closing in and looking at the DA as really a good example of, this would be a really good way to see if the tool works, because the margin of victory was pretty close, right? All the way throughout. Yeah, so the only reason we didn't match 1 to 6 is we were actually building the code. And so, it took us a while to figure out.
And the code you were building was basically supposed to apply the same RCV logic.
Sorry?
The code you were writing was reproducing the same logic as is in Dominion calculations.
Yes. All right, so again, by way of acknowledgement, Michelle Blum, absolutely amazingly bright lady. Most of the step of the audit is actually due to her work. And again, besides Dan King, all these people work pro bono. And they worked at all hours, by the way. I forgot exactly what time it is in Australia, but I remember I was like interrupted my rugby watching at 4 in the morning when it was happening in Japan, and they were still coding. So, so the assertion generator is not something I can really show you, because it's really, at the end of the day, it generates an output that's JSON. It's not that fancy. So the visualizer is actually more interesting, and so we're going to get to that now. And so this is a tree that I was telling you about, which is really look at those assertions, and based on the assertion, makes the assertion and say, look, this candidate cannot win against this candidate cannot win if this one is going to win before this next one, and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the author of this code, Vanessa T, will be at Pier 31 tomorrow. So if you'd like to, have questions that she can answer, by all means, feel free to do so.
Yeah, between what hours will she be there?
At 9.
At night?
At 9.
Oh, 9, okay.
Yeah. So, but I think we're going to run the audit, right? And then once it's over, I think if you have questions and you want to, by all means, Dan King will be there as well, and so he can tell you everything. He never did anything with elections, so he and I had learned as we went. But he did a fantastic job as well. Yes. And so, and then the last but not least is Philip Stark. I think most of you know him. I think his title's almost took me out of my PowerPoint, real estate. He's associate dean of mathematics, professor of statistics, and I think he has another title. But ultimately, he's the father of RLA. He invented RLA in 2008, and so he has participated in actually dozens of RLA himself. His work is actually the basis of the Colorado RLA, and this math is still being used by the different derivative that came out of Corla. But to be clear, Shangri-La, as he calls it, is a substantial change to the Corla method. It's much more advanced. Not just because it can do RCV, it's actually designed to do anything. It can do RCV, non-RCV, whatever contest you have. I think he has engineered everything in there. We didn't bother testing that because we were really focused on doing a Rancho's Wood.
Is he going to be coming tomorrow also?
Sorry?
Is he going to be coming tomorrow as well?
No, he's not. He's actually in Israel, and the funny thing is, he didn't stop working. I mean, he left November 12th, and he was still coding. He was coding the plane. Yeah. And I just put a little arrow that, in case people know GitHub, we got busy in November. That dark green there. Yes, that was these guys, putting codes right and left. So lastly, I want to talk about the actual tool that the auditor used to, again, look at the ballots and enter it. The good news is we get a quick start because the Department of Election actually had a demo for RCV, right? And so someone had the idea of actually grabbing that as a basis to start it because it has the logic for post-processing of ballot, right? So if you take two candidates and rank them number one, the code was already there to tell us that's an overvote or whatever. I forgot what's the actual definition, but it knew that, right? The one thing it didn't know though was write-ins, right? I don't know if you've seen the demo, but there's no write-in in the demo, and actually that's a tricky part. And so we spent quite a bit of time trying to understand how that works. And the way it works is really simple. In this case, there's a team of 2 auditors and there's 3 teams. And so the first auditor looks at the ballot. First looks at the ballot, then looks on the list of ballots to pull and see if the ballot, the ballot ID is there, picks that, then looks at the ballot, say, okay, this is how this person voted, clicks there, right? Then says submit. The second auditor is get a chance to look at this to make sure that the first auditor didn't mess up and say, okay, yeah, what I see is what you see. and then they submit to verify, right? And by the way, there could also be no consensus. So there could be a case where those two auditors were not able to come to an agreement, in which case they can push the no consensus button, and that ballot basically is no longer part of the computation, for lack of a better term, right? And then once all of that is done, you actually submit, and it creates a JSON file for that ballot, okay? So, that's all that has been built so far, in 6 weeks, with 6 people from all over the world.
I'm just really quickly, how many more slides is there?
This is it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so, the next step is gonna be interesting. For those of you interested, we have ideas about, kind of how to take this from pilot to product. We need to take the code and standardize on 8 or 2 languages versus having 5. That way we can actually take it out of the Jupyter notebook and make it executable on its own. I also think that we need to get out of JSON a little bit because it's just ill-suited for what we're trying to do. This whole NoSQL thing is interesting, but I come from the database world, and this is a pure example of an entity relationship model with primary key, foreign key. It would be so much easier to do it that way. So we're going to take a look at that. And then build a test suite above and beyond what was built. Every unit was tested, but we didn't build an integration test suite. And then finally document. And then phase 2, I think, by the way, we think phase 1 is something that we're going to undertake. I mean, DT will undertake with some funds that we still have. But I think phase 2 is when ultimately this will be available. I mean, it's already available, right? But this is where we want to finish it and then have other people contribute to it. But people can contribute to it now if they want, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions before we move to public comment?
I just have one suggestion or slash question, and that is, so Director Terrell informed us that she created an open source voting website for the project. And I was wondering if maybe you could provide some information about the project on that page, like, for example, the links to the repositories and maybe the PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, great idea.
So it's more visible.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This is amazing work in such a short amount of time. I really commend you for this work and for leading this project.
Well, they're the ones that do the work, but I can show you the Slack logs if you like. It was nonstop. And pro bono.
And eager to see how we can make this, to see what the next step is and how to implement this and make it usable. What are your suggestions?
Well, the first step is tomorrow. Make sure it works. Right? And then once that's done, right, is we need to figure out, I think, the code is it's all open source, we can all go in there and so on and so forth, but I think we need to do some cleanup because, I mean, this is accelerated development schedule, right? And so I don't know the discipline on the branches. The one thing I learned, because I've worked with engineers in the past, but I've never worked with academics, they do not understand the concept of code freeze. I mean, it literally, they never stop writing code. And so we just need to do a little cleanup. But yeah, I think we definitely want to take it to the next step.
And just one last question, would you mind putting up the slide again with the contributors to this project?
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can do that now. Oh, yeah.
And I wonder how the commissioners would feel about, as a commission, thanking and commending the members of this team for their work.
Yes, I would want that very thing as well. I think we should. I think we should copy the mayor and the board of supervisors.
How about a motion then to commend the members of the team for their work and authorize the president to do so in a letter copying the mayor and the board of supervisors.
A second, is that a first motion?
Yes.
I second the motion.
Could you repeat the motion? for speaking minutes. I'll have it.
It's two. The motion is to, as a commission, commend the members of the team identified here on this slide. I won't read them all out to you. And to authorize the president or her designee to draft a commendation letter, copy mayor or supervisors or else she wants to approve it.
Great. You still second that?
Yeah, I keep my second.
Yes, thank you. I guess before we vote on it, I think we should just take public comment on both then, on this item and on the motion. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you for the presentation.
Great
Thank
work.
you so much. Yes, we really appreciate it. We'll take public comment on item number 3. Any public comment?
Do I use this? One word.
Either one.
I think they're both
Okay.
working.
I'm Jim Soper from the Voting Rights Task Force, and I am minorly blown away because I was serving 10 years ago on the San Francisco Voting Systems Task Force, and the issue of how do you do an audit on RCV. David Carey came up with one solution that he presented at a conference in 2010 in Washington. I made an informal presentation. In other words, I did not submit a paper and I have no way to claim authorship of anything. But if I'm understanding this right, what you're calling assertions gets at the idea that I was getting at, was look at the thing as we have a primary election, audit that, and then don't try to confound all the statistics with the runoff election. Just consider them two separate elections. It was a rethink, and it didn't exactly catch fire, but I didn't talk about it, and I got a feeling this is doing something like that, in which case, good. And yes, the people working on this need to be applauded. I agree that JSON may not be the best language to use here. And I thought I saw something in the early slides, somehow claiming that like Australian and English are different languages. And
That was a joke. That was English, American, and Australian. True though.
it's really confusing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Brent Turner with the California Association of Voting Officials. I wanted to thank the nice gentleman from TAC for doing that good website design work for the Elections Department. It looked great. Also, Loren mentioned answering some security questions next time that we get together here. That's great news because of obviously the national security crisis happening. We want to make sure that at every election systems meeting, we're addressing the core issues here as we're hopefully leading the country toward these better systems. When we talk about back-end systems, audit systems, I think it was good to hear that Commissioner Hill raised a suspicion. Auditing a proprietary software system is, we talk about like clapping with one hand. It is an exercise in futility. 100% audits are great if you're going to audit. Audits previous to transportation of the ballots are great if you're going to do it. It almost turns into a hand count, preferably. We have to throw in some caveats regarding this particular risk limiting audit. Great that it's an open source, great that it's maybe better than some other audit that might purport to attach. The fact that we're devoting energies and focus to the back end of the system is opposed to our position that all focus has to be on the front end of the system and the first count. Because if you don't get that first count right and you start talking about audits, you're just fooling yourself and somebody else is fooling you too. In particular, Philip Stark is, I'm sure, a great mathematician. Dr. Rebecca Mercury takes exception to his work. We might want to get in touch with her as well and not break into complete celebration until we vet properly from all perspectives of the well-degreed people. The verified voting group that I keep warning about, they happen to, Philip Stark is part of verified voting. I've been mentioning for years, verified voting, Microsoft will show up. We're feeling the pressure in City Hall of Microsoft delaying the hell out of this project, and the country is suffering because of this Microsoft vendor push to delay this project. We want to keep our focus on the front end of the system and making sure we're building a front end vote capture system. Then the audit part is great and certainly is part and parcel to a functional system, but don't be confused. This is a minor part, the audit. The front end, making sure that first vote is correct, is the essence of the open source issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Denise Story, and the Department of Defense and NASA, they understand the importance of open source software. And I would like to see our lawmakers follow suit. I guess the Department of Defense maybe don't take money from Microsoft. I don't know. I really don't know who to point the finger at. I think that we, the American people, deserve accountability on this level because it's our votes. We take the trouble to go cast these votes, and we deserve to have them counted properly. And we also deserve to be educated about this issue because not many people know about this issue. Do you see anybody out here? Who do you see out here fighting for this? And if they knew, they would be, this room would be full if we at least had a dialogue about this somewhere. This is, just one of many topics if there isn't enough dialogue, and that's why, we have this sad state of affairs today where we really feel like we're losing control of our democracy. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. We will take a vote on the motion. I will, I'm not, oh.
One other comment. I'm sort of in the back of my mind, I don't know if this is delusions of grandeur, but whether we should also copy our Congressman, Nancy Pelosi, and also the Secretary of State.
Okay, so
as a friendly amendment.
Commissioner Johnson. Great. That's
Sure.
Great. So do I don't have to repeat the whole motion, I'm gonna just say Commissioner John's motion. Kidding. So those in favor of the motion from Commissioner John, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say no. The motion is carried. Thank you.
All abstentions, just in case.
What's it say?
Do you want to call the abstentions just in case for the record?
You don't have to, I think it's pretty clear,
Yeah.
Carrie, but if you want to, doesn't hurt.
I'm not going to be that technical, so thank you. So thank you so much for the presentation, and I will follow up with a letter and CC the members that were identified. Okay.
I do want to mention one other thing, and
oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
which was the first item in the history and the state of the art of the open source voting project is the draft is distribution by 12/1. Okay, so that's going to be now. So anyways, just want to point out that we want to make sure that doesn't go into our election inbox and get lost. The first item from Director Cheryl. The draft report on the history and the state of the art of open source voting projects.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure, hopefully we have a lot of secretary, but if we don't, I provided my email address so that make sure it's distributed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Moving on, item number 4, Commissioner's report. Commissioner reports on topics not covered by another item on this agenda. meetings with public official oversight and observation activities, long-range planning with board commission activities and areas of study and proposed legislation which affects elections. Any commissioners report today?
Yes, I have a report. On November 18th, Commissioner Jurvanek and I met with Director Jarrell and Michael Maxman, who is the city's information security officer of the city and county. We discussed three things related to election security. I learned a lot about the structure of the cybersecurity reporting system in the city and county. Because Director Jarrell is not here, I'd like to table these decisions for the next meeting. But what was discussed between Commissioner Jurvanek, myself, Director Jarrell, and Michael Maxman were three things. Two agreements were reached, and one was tabled for further discussion with Director Arntz. The two things that were agreed to involve the Department of Technology providing the commissioners with a brief introductory training into the critical incident communication strategy that the Department of Technology uses should there be a cyber event of relevance to the Elections Department and of relevance to the Commission. That needs to be coordinated, the timing of that, not to happen until 2020, and would be coordinated with Director Arntz and the Department of Elections. The second thing, Director Jarrell offered to do, there is something called the ESF 18 cyber plan, which is a countywide cyber plan that she would like to provide an overview of to the commissioners at a time to be scheduled. This is something that will first be presented to board of supervisors, and then would be she agreed to present that information to us as the first commission in the city to get access to that information. Both of those are to be scheduled and to be coordinated with the Department of Elections and Director Arntz. The third item we discussed, which we did not reach a conclusion on, and I should say that immediately following the meeting with Director Jarrell and Michael Maxman, Commissioner Jurvanek and I met with Director Arntz and Attorney Shen. The third item was continued discussion on this idea of a regular commission update on security activities. There are two parts to that. We reached consensus on neither of them. The two tracks there are what information would be relayed, and the second track is how and how often and what format. So we haven't reached agreement on that. Director Arntz, Attorney Shen, Commissioner Jurvanek, and I agreed informally that given that there is a software update to be made to the Dominion system between the November election that's just happened and the March election in 2020, that period of time gave us an opportunity to try to come to agreement about what constituted the kinds of information that would be both meaningful to the commission and appropriately transmitted by Director Arntz and his team without causing an undue burden. And so my hope is that in the next 4-month period, I'm willing to take this on to continue to be in conversation with Director Arntz about what kind of information would fall into that category, which would answer the question of what information are we talking about. The second track of how has to do with the desire expressed specifically by the Director of Technology that this information not be put in writing, which makes it difficult to use some of the strategies we had considered, which included just folding this information into the monthly Director of Elections report to the Commission, because the cyber security team does not want this information in writing. So short version of that, still working on it, but progress is being made. And I want to thank Director Arntz for his time and Director Jarrell, who's not here.
Yeah, thank you so much for also Commissioner Fernholz for like taking the lead and Commissioner Trinanik. That's really helpful. Any other commissioner reports?
Yeah, I just wanted to update everyone. I do observing in the November 5th election. I went to the training, and I observed 3 precincts through the day, as well as the election center here at City Hall. One of the things that, and I sent an email to you just today, Director Arndt, so I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. It was late in the afternoon.
Just briefly looked at it, huh?
Yeah, but essentially, training as usual, very well organized, and I think that one of the things was with the new equipment, there wasn't quite enough time for everybody to go all the way through the setup and the breakdown, at least not in the class that I was in. So that would be one thing, and that an area of concern now. That, again, but there is the lab, so it may be that Director Arndt, that, and this was a course that included both inspectors and clerks, so maybe if it was all inspectors, it would have gone faster, but having somebody who's actually designated as an expert that has to go through the entire process might be, per precinct, would be a good thing, which would probably be the inspector. But assure that they've gone through the entire process. Also, that the ballots that we had to run were all, they were all error, had some error type in it. We didn't run any that were standard ballots. We didn't have any blank ones handy. So I don't know what it was like, at least in the training, to run a standard ballot, but also that what you get is you get a faint sound from the system when the ballot properly processes, but nothing but errors, as we did in the old system. So as a result, people, and it takes quite a bit of time, 3 to 4 seconds to actually run through the system. So the thing is 2 ballot cards is not a big deal. More ballot cards will be a big deal. And then if we get to a higher volume of elections, that you might get a backlog. There's a few cases where people would put in the ballot, they'd walk away, but it would be error. And by the time they were out the door and around the corner, you know, they were in a hurry to get to work or whatever. At least I shouldn't say there were a few cases. It's possible that could have happened. That was what we discussed in the training. Which would add to further backlog. So I don't know if there's a possibility of speeding up the machines, Director Arndt, but that is something that seems like might be a potential concern, particularly as we move towards the presidential election. And then the final thing is actually looking at the machine and what is presented to the voter on the screen when there are errors. It's just a lot of information. And then we also hand them a spiral-bound book to further explain it. And it seems like that would be right for some sort of simplification. So, Director Arndt, maybe between now and next month we can get some of your feedback or thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So I was not a polling place worker this election, but last Wednesday I did attend the random selection of precincts, and I'm going to attend the RLA pilot tomorrow morning. And let's see, I thought one item of interest that happened in the November election was on the East Coast. Some news is that New York City adopted ranked choice voting for almost all of their city elections, and that was a proposition that passed with 73% voter support. So I thought that was a significant. I think that the statistic is that with New York City's adoption, it's basically tripling the number of voters in the United States that are using ranked choice voting in some elections. So there's just a lot of support around the issue in that city.
Any other comments? I will also hopefully be able to attend tomorrow morning as well. And you know, I didn't get a chance to do a lot of election day things, but you know, from feedback from folks, and I was able to come to City Hall. It was very well run, and so thank you for your hard work and your staff as well. I know it's always a long couple days, and so I really appreciate how cheerful everyone is at City Hall during the long day. And I also wanted to note that I know that there's been a couple of delays in terms of presenting the minutes from the last couple of meetings, but I'll have that for the next meeting. So thank you everyone for your patience and participating in taking minutes and taking turns. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. We'll go into public comment for item number 4.
Brent Turner with Cabo. I just want to, again, before I depart, express my appreciation for the service that this board and this group of commissioners and others have had over the years. I'm sure everyone here associates me with this issue of open source. We did pioneer this work starting back in the year 2000 and have been working now 20 years pro bono, trying to get this pushed forward. And we have made predictions here, and just for the record, our accuracy rate has been, I think, 100%. So we encourage you to keep pushing forward. When you have these meetings with the Department of Technology and the Department of Elections, please encourage them to actually build this project out and to get started. The sooner we get started actually building this, the sooner we'll get finished. So if we wait another 3-4 years to get started, that's going to be rough. We're looking at, hopefully getting this done so that maybe by 2026, the United States elections could be appropriately secure. But make no mistake, until we start this project here, we will not have secure elections in the United States. No amount of audits will give them to us. It is just a cluster, you know what, and that's the name of that tune. So again, I appreciate all the work that's gone on here over the years. It appears that we're almost redundant at this point. If we're not pushing the mayor to do things with the governor, we're not getting the funds together, we're not really struggling for this effort. The concern is that it's just going to fade. Hopefully Laurent and Linda will carry this forward, but we're just not seeing it started yet. So I think we need a plan of what we're going to do and then actually do it. You see that the open source people that we've drummed up, they can whip up a website page like nobody's business. And these are not, the higher level open source people. So the real ones that are at, not the world ranking, they're high level, but not the world ranking people like you've got available for this build out of an open source voting system. This can be accomplished, but we have to start. And I hope you're in meetings with the mayor. I hope you're talking to the supervisors. I hope we're not just letting this go because it took us so many years to get the political will in San Francisco to have Kismet and all the board members on board, all the board of supervisors. At one point, of course, we had the mayor. Before the mayor got elected, she campaigned on open source voting as a platform. We're just not seeing that fire. We are speaking with the Lieutenant Governor, Kounalakis, hopefully trying to get through to Governor Newsom. We know that John Arntz mentioned he thought it was sort of hysteria, all this election system integrity talk, but we're hopeful you as a group carry it through. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one comment, which is the Open Source Voting System Act to me seems pretty high level.
Yeah, pretty high level, yeah.
And appreciate their work very much.
Very much, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Item number 5, Director's Report. Director's Report on departmental activities, including the November 5th, 2019 election. Director Arntz?
Thanks. So, beyond my written report that I submitted, I expect to certify the election next week, and we've been redacting the ballot images the last 2 weeks. It's taken quite a while. And by the time that I certify, hopefully be Tuesday, then we'll also post the ballot images of all the ballots that were cast in this election. And the ballot images will, as I've said before, will have the audit mark on these, so people actually will see how the votes were cast on the cards for this election in San Francisco. They'll also get a statement from the voting system how each vote for every contest and measure was interpreted that was cast in San Francisco. And then of course, people can take that and they can even do their own logic and action testing in small samples and use precincts or districts and get a sense of the audit marks and images match what's on the cast vote record. So we'll get that out next Tuesday. And then on this RLA event tomorrow, it was never meant to be an event. And actually, the RLA tool that we were planning on using for the last several months, we may or may not use tomorrow. And all this with the RCB, RLA, has come together very quickly. It's not anything that I planned, so I was not trying to not invite people to the warehouse tomorrow. It will be streamed on our website, as is all events we handle ballots, so you can actually watch us online. So tomorrow what you're going to see is us inputting the votes into an application, and that's going to be the extent of it. And then I guess they'll run the final the calculation tomorrow, but I haven't seen that yet. And then after next week as well, we'll start to send out the reports, the vote by mail, provisional, the incident reports, all the reports that we send to the commission. We'll get those packaged up. We'll send those out next week. And yeah, so that's my. I can take questions on this report or anything else.
Great. Commissioners, questions?
Just one other question, Director Arns, about the voter information pamphlet, and thank you for including the election commission here, but it looks as though it was a bit of, well anyways, it's buried on page 23. I don't know if that was just where the space was available. It's not called out anywhere in the general information table of contents, and I think that this as a resource for the public to, should they have any complaints, it's important that they know about the election commission. So I would like to see us be somewhere in proximity of the front of the VIP, similar to what's here for the ballot simplification committee, and it also be called out in the table of contents. Is that possible for March?
Maybe. I'll have to look into it. I don't know where it's going to be placed in the table of contents. I mean, we're putting together now. We'll look.
That's why I wanted to bring it up, so we have enough time to do that. Thank you.
So I have a couple comments and questions about the election, but first I'm sure I can speak for a number of people on the commission, but I just want to commend you for doing such an excellent job. There's a lot of drama around a number of races, and I think it seems like there's a lot of public confidence in the result, even though it was so close. So I'm sure you felt a lot of pressure after those first few days. I just had a really quick, just kind of a minor question, but and I probably should already know this by now, but for the vote by mail versus election day totals on the summary, which category are the provisional ballots in?
They'll be in the precinct.
In the election day?
Right. Election day.
Okay. And then, yeah, I think that's all I have to say. And then I'll save more detailed feedback for between now and the next meeting.
One final comment. So there has been a recall notice of intention filed yesterday. I don't think I saw it in the paper for District 1 supervisor. So that there's a process of 5-day period for response, and then for the department receipt of the public notice of publication. Then we have to review the petition if one is to be certified to approve the petition. So there's a chance that the recall question may be included on the March ballot. So if you see that, if you're seeing the meeting, that's what's going on in the background.
What's the deadline for them to petitions?
Yeah, there's a series of steps to take that. But as far as circulating a petition is concerned, it could occur as early as the second week in December. But it could be into as mid, maybe a little later, depending on when things happen.
Actually, there was one issue I wanted to ask about. I almost forgot. So there were some news reports on election day about the D5 ballots not being available in some precincts. And but I was just going off what the article said. I don't really know the details. They were saying that some people in the morning voted without.
There's like a couple of reporters tweeting. I don't think there was an actual article on it, but, or did you see it on it?
I think it was either one. I would have to double check, but do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. Well, yeah, so what I was hearing about was that there were apparently some precincts in D5 where the people were saying that the voters were receiving their ballots but not without the supervisor race.
Oh, no, that didn't happen.
Okay.
And we did get a call later. I got someone from the media, I think, asked me a question later in the day. It wasn't for D5, it might have been We actually asked the inspector to take photos of the ballots at the precinct, and we sent those to the reporter. But all the ballots, because the machines are, they accept a specific ballot type from the precinct, so if a contest was not on a ballot type, then the wrong ballot types at the polling place at the precinct. Machines wouldn't even accept those ballots. I'm not aware of anyone not having the correct ballots.
But in particular, the D5 race was on the same card as the rest of it. It wasn't on its own card.
Correct.
Okay.
Because right after the mayor's contest, so District 5.
Thanks.
Which is different for ranked choice voting in the past, where ranked choice voting is always on its own separate card.
Yeah.
But with the new system, we can consolidate the ranked choice within and amidst the other contests and measures.
That's good.
All right.
Just, how did the voting center at SSA work out?
It was a pretty low turnout overall in the city, so including the SF State Voting Center. I think March will be a little better sense, and I think November 2020 really give you a sense. We'll open up the third voting center, the second off-site voting center at the Joseph Lee Rec Center. So we're organizing that now, starting our site visits. So we'll see. And then also what's new for March is that people can do what's called conditional voter registration. They can vote at polling places. So there's no need for people to actually go to a voting centers if they're not registered. They can register to vote at polling places. So that's also going to change the dynamic as well as potential activity at voting centers.
Can I ask a question? I was, this will be my first on the commission for a presidential primary, and I noticed that in your report it said that you will be sending out 110 postcards to voters with no party preference. Does that mean that now that you just said that you could register with conditional ballots at the polling place, will they be able to change their party preference on the day of as well?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
But
not
don't
giving
encourage
me
it.
Okay, I know.
Yeah,
I'm just
because
trying to
it's
have a little less anxiety
Yeah.
of people saying that they weren't able to vote.
Right.
I assume that the preference is that they would change party preference earlier.
Absolutely.
And then I know that you'll be sending postcards, but have you, this is a large number, and so I'm just curious of are there other things that, we should be taking in consideration or something or another, to be able to let the public know that they should consider changing it before Election Day?
We actually had it started before the November election, so
Okay,
we've had signage up.
Okay.
We'll start with the bar ads and the bus ads. We'll be on the radio. We'll be in the newspapers. We'll have our interviews. The information and the polling places already referenced the March election. The voter guide that went out in November referenced the March election. For those voters who are permanent vote by mail voters who don't respond to this postcard, which is the one referenced in my notes, they'll receive a second postcard from us indicating they haven't received it, they respond to the first postcard. So it'll be an ongoing outreach to these voters. And of course, there's going to be many people who, for whatever reason, aren't going to receive the information until the very last minute on election day. But we're certainly trying to get the word out there. And I think also the other groups and organizations are getting word out there to people regarding the potential, usually it's crossover voting because it's the people with no party preference that are the focus, because they can just cross over and vote an American independent, Democratic, or Libertarian ballot. Not so much people changing registration sometimes with the American Independent Party folks, because when they register to vote, they often say, well, I thought that meant I was independent, that I have any party affiliation. So that group of people will benefit from having to change registration, but people who just want to vote, who are nonpartisan, want to vote for one of the three parties mentioned, they don't have to re-register. They can ask for those ballots at polling places or at City Hall. That's
Okay.
crossover voting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that information. Any other comments?
I would also like to congratulate the director on an election well done. I had a couple things. So one, I happened to come across on election day a live stream from the Denver Department of Elections, Denver, Colorado, where they were similar to our department, showing in real time how the department was processing ballots. And they also had someone from their department, like in front of the camera, talking in plain English to viewers and explaining what the process was. And this was sort of an ongoing narrator for the process, and I thought it was really helpful. And I wanted to ask if we do anything like that, or if we just sort of have the cameras running in the background without commentary.
Yeah, so our cameras run in the background without commentary, and I visited Denver's election operation. They actually have a press office for that, for their elections department. We don't. So they actually can plan and staff such things. So I don't know how, it must have been just timed events. There's no way they could have done this on a continuous basis. So it must have been a schedule where they gave presentations to people. But no, we don't provide such live commentary on our programs.
Don't play by play.
And following up on President Modi's question about the postcards, it made me wonder, do we have any plans for upcoming elections now that we have this conditional voter registration that will be coming into place starting in March? Do we have any plans to send postcards to unregistered but eligible residents of San Francisco, telling them that they will be able to register at their polling place should they want to vote, and even if they're not yet registered?
Yeah, in every election we send mailers to every residential address in San Francisco, so we know someone's not registered. If they have a residential address, they're receiving information from us. And then, of course, the primary information will be what's in this notice that we send to all these addresses.
And will those communications ahead of the March election will those postcards inform people that they will be able to register at their polling place?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just wanted to say, I provided a couple what I thought was constructive feedback, but I also was very impressed with the way the election went, particularly with the new equipment. So I do want to comment that I think it went very well. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, we definitely appreciate you and your team. Any public comment? Let's go into public comment for item number 5.
Hello, Commissioners, Ron Catano. I just wanted to say that I found the article that Commissioner Gianni was referring to about the D5 race. It's a column in the San Francisco Examiner published November 5th, so on election day, by Joe Rodriguez. Title is Botched Ballots and SF Supervisor Race, Not the Only Shadow Cast Over Election Day. And it's about a bunch of other things, but the relevant part is, quote, firstly, a seemingly small screw up in a little talked about race between Supervisor Valley Brown and candidate Dean Preston for Supervisor District 5 stopped at least 5 voters and perhaps more from voting for their neighborhood supervisor. John Harness, the Director of the Department of Elections, confirmed a ballot inspector took a box with the wrong ballot type to a District 5 precincts. Only 10 people trying to cast the correct ballots, he said, but voting technology caught the software. Those incorrect ballots were quickly replaced. The machine rejected them, marks added. And that's and there's more talk about it, but that's, I believe that is the article that Commissioner Gianni was most likely referring to.
Oh, yes, that's a different question. So we did have.
Thank you, that was.
So we did have the inspector not show up to the polling place. We had to send out a replacement inspector from City Hall. The wrong ballot type was sent with that inspector, but again, the ballot type was not, the equipment was not set for the ballot type that arrived with the replacement inspector, so it wouldn't accept those ballots. Then around the same time, the field election deputy, who has the supplemental delivery of ballots that would go to the polling place, arrived, provided the correct ballot type. And then all the voters, there were 5 voters who were affected. They received the right cards. None of the wrong cards were cast, but we actually captured all the cards. None of them were voting, so the machine would take them. And they all received the correct vote. So that's the one instance that I'm aware of. But none of the polling places had the wrong ballots. That wasn't the case on election day.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
Yes, here's just for the commissioners another article. reading, to make things more complicated, the D5 election operation was at best a little screwed up. Both sides reported polling places with no D5 ballots. In one precinct, the D5 ballots didn't arrive until 10 a.m. after more than 40 voters had cast ballots without voting for a candidate for supervisor. In another precinct, the closed down voting site sent voters across district lines to a place where there were, of course, no D5 ballots. I guess I'm grateful to Commissioner Jurvanek for mentioning that there seems to be some issues that occurred. Not that Director Ernst is to blame, because of course he's held hostage to Steve Bennett, Dominion Voting Systems, the same fellow that sold us the last Sequoia system is also the same salesperson selling us this new system. These systems are horribly deficient. They cannot be repaired. There's no solution. There's no way, there's no workaround. The system has to be junked, and we have to extricate ourselves from the contract through whatever backward motion we can muster. We have to get Laurent and Linda in forward motion immediately to start the build out of the new system, and we have to be thinking about where the funding is going to come from, because people are putting figures in Linda's ear that are quite higher than the open source experts that we're tendering. So they're trying to figure out, where to go from here. But there's numbers that have been presented to this commission by the group OSET that I'm sure some of you are familiar with. Some of you might even sit on their board or be a part of that consortia. We reject their numbers of $25, $30 million to build out this system. We think it's more 15 million, something like that. So we're trying to grapple with these huge numbers. We're trying to grapple with now our focus being taken off here by verified voting again, risk limiting audits being great, but we have to keep our focus here. These systems that Director Ernst is using, we don't want a Colorado style operation that talks about how smooth everything's going, because of course that's all BS. There's no way to know what's going on with this system that we're currently using, no way to know if the votes are really being captured properly, and no amount of audit will save us. So if we're going to do things right here in San Francisco and set precedent for the rest of the country, we should really be setting agenda for upcoming meetings so that we can get Linda and Laurent in front of us and answer the hard questions rather than celebrate this past election. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, please? What was the source of the quote you read?
I'm looking for the writer's name.
What is the?
48 Hills, Tim Redmond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. I'm wondering, do we still need to public comment on item 7? If we do, then can we take that first before we go into?
If you'd like to do that, that's
Yeah.
fine, but yeah, take
Okay.
public comment on it. We're gonna do
So
that.
I would like to actually, take the agenda items for future meetings first.
Okay.
If commissioners have one, so I can take note and take public comment on it before we move to, item number 6. Anyone? I already got Commissioner Fernholz.
So Director Arndt, do you expect to be able to certify the election this week?
Next week.
Next week, okay. I think there should be a vote.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll have a vote actually in the first week of December. Commissioners?
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners for?
December 4th? Me, probably.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
you have a quorum.
Great.
Great. Any other commissioners for future agenda items or future meetings? Can we take public comment on this item?
Yes, Commissioners, thank you again for your hospitality. The public request that we may bring out Dr. Rebecca Mercury to talk about risk limiting audit, and if we can get some focus on front-end open source election systems, perhaps bring forward Brian Fox and Alan Decker, some other folks that have been pioneering this effort, and we'll try to get on track here. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up? You've mentioned some of these experts in the past as potential people to come in and speak with us. Can you just explain what you have in mind? It would be some sort of presentation or just an opportunity for us to ask some questions?
I think the question and answer, direct question and answer would be beneficial. I think that talking about some costs and things would be beneficial, just to try to get some our arms around what we're talking about, best procedures moving forward expeditiously, what it would take in their minds to really expedite this project. I think since they pioneered this work and have demonstrated these kinds of systems, they have some good insight. And I know them to be vetted so that they don't have some Microsoft interest or some other interest at heart. They're just good patriots.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. I'm going to move back to item number 6, Public Employee Appointment and Hearing, Class 1444, Elections Commission Secretary, discussion and possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding the hiring of a Commission Secretary, report by Commissioner Jordanek regarding evaluation and, if applicable, interviews of candidates, deliberation and possible action to make an offer of employment or take other action. The meeting may be held in closed session pursuant of Government Code 54957B and San Francisco Administrative Code 67.10B. Should we be taking public comment first on the matter?
Yes.
Okay, so I will take public comment on all matters pertaining to agenda item number 6. Any public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed, and item B is we would have to be taking a vote whether we hold the meeting in closed session.
Correct.
So I move that we move into closed session.
A second.
Great. Those in favor of taking this meeting into closed session, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say no. Okay, the motion carries. We will be moving into closed session. So we are, can we go?
Yeah.
Okay, we're back in open session. Commissioner Jordanek reported the commission secretary role regarding a screening of a candidate for a position for commission secretary. We determined that the hiring process would remain ongoing and we would continue considering additional candidates. And then I just can enjoy the meeting? Correct? Are we done?
Well, here, so.
Oh, sorry.
This is what you're gonna get, Jill. So, the final item on our agenda is that you need to vote to elect whether to disclose any or all of the closed session discussions. So you should vote
In public session.
you should vote, now that you're in
I
open
move to
session.
keep the contents of the closed session confidential. Second.
So those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say no. The
And
motion.
for the record, we had no public, so there was no public comment.
And so there was no public comments. Thank you for that. And it is now 8:57 p.m. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.